might think that this is not open source, but our systems are programmed in C, which is a publicly available programming language, and therefore it's open source. And the document, you think that's funny, huh? Well, this company still makes the software and the hardware that counts your votes, not mine. Then we got a little bit of insight into government strategy. There was these two commissions, and the one that was supposed to report on the past being this thing that's far away and closed off and we're going to do everything differently. And there was a community that reports on the future, which is also far away when everything's going to be different. And of course this left this convenient period, the now, which they could stretch as long as they wanted, because of course we wanted to do it right for the future, where they would not have any of these commission reports to bother them, and they really wanted to keep the NAIDOPS around, at least until they got something new, or at least until they could build new stuff or get industry to build new stuff. Also, we learned a lot about how commissions work, because these commissions were supported by civil servants from the ministry. And of course, these civil servants were the people that were interested in keeping these NAIDOPS around. So the facts that this commission got to deal with and then sort of the reality that was presented to them was very colored towards let's keep these NAIDOPS around. Is there maybe a glass of water somewhere? Is that water? Or somebody maybe has one? Ah, never mind, it's not full. And clearly they also figured that these activists would go away, that this whole activist problem was a temporary thing. We now had our 5 minutes of fame, thanks. And these commissions were appointed, and actually as we had our first conversation at the ministry at the end of 2006, they already said stuff like, well, you now have your attention, we're going to fix it now, you just go away and do something else and we'll fix it for you. Then in July also, the NAIDOP factory caught fire, or at least the place where they were testing and rebuilding voting machines. And as I heard that, I was in Amsterdam, I have an alibi. Yeah, don't laugh, because I was scared shitless. Because I figured we were saying very serious things about how democracy was really suffering from these voting machine vendors and how they had gotten hold of our elections. And I thought, oh my God, it's only going to take one crazy person to really do damage to our campaign. If it turns out that somebody that has been reading our website has set fire to their factory, we're screwed. As it turned out, luckily, the fire was not set at all. It was started in their testing room from a short circuit. So it was apparently all researched and there was no arson involved. Throughout the year, we also discovered something else interesting. And that is that we started reading and rereading the regulations, and we found something interesting. Namely that the definition of a voting machine allows for the inclusion of auxiliary equipment, meaning the stuff they need to get the machine ready for the election, the software they need to put the candidates in or to tabulate the results. They could all include that in the definition of a voting machine. However, the voting machine must also have a user-friendly facility that allows for the list of candidates to be entered. Now, that facility was in the software that they were trying not to have tested, because this Groenendaal software that is run at the municipality, that they program the candidates with, tabulate the results with, that is explicitly not part of the voting machine in terms of the testing bureaucracy. So they tried to exclude that, and we basically pointed to this being mutually exclusive. Either they wanted it in which case the voting machine would meet the requirements, but then it would need to be tested, or they wanted it out, but then the voting machine no longer met the requirements. Based on that and a number of other things, we appealed the approval, because for the provincial elections they did a new approval, which we appealed because it didn't meet the requirements, but also because the documents weren't even in the hands of government. Brightsight, the company that does the testing, that is accredited in Holland by law to do the testing of voting machines, that company had written an extensive report and a one-page certificate that said, yes, it meets the requirement, and only the certificate had to be given to government. However, they based their decision on the two documents, both on the certificate and on the report. And the report wasn't with government. It was only, they were allowed to see it, and then it was taken away from them, like, yes, now you've seen it, now go away. And of course, when you get to a judge, if you appeal a decision, the documents underlying that decision have to be in front of the judge. And NAIDOP was refusing. And then came the second report. We had been to court at that point, pleading our case, like there's a document missing and they don't meet the requirements. And then the second report, this was the How Do We Get Out of This Mess Commission. And they basically advised on a system with two computers, one to print votes and the other to count. And there's a little movie they did, which is much, much longer, where they show how the system works. You select and then it prints. And then in the evening, you throw that into a... So there's only one count based on the pieces of paper inserted into the... Yeah? And then a machine counts the votes. Now, why anybody would want to do this, but this is how they want to do it, because humans can't count votes, they think. So they still want the result to come from some computer, but they split it up so that there's something to recount. And they want to make the software for both devices open. Of course, it's a much better solution than what we have, which is just trust us, and it's a count coming from a computer, and you just have to trust it. As a result of this commission report, or at least that's the official story, and probably because, as a result of the fact that we went to court, and that they were expecting the decision to be negative, government actually gave up on the NAIDOPs. They were going to make new regulations. Hello. They were going to make new regulations to sort of reapprove the NAIDOPs, but make the regulations a little bit more up to date. And the Secretary of State, upon accepting the report, basically announced we're going to retract all legislation and basically scrap the current generation of voting machines, going back to paper ballots until this new system that was proposed was in existence. Yeah, that made us very happy, and we were even happier when the week after they also lost in court, basically nullifying the approval decision. So NAIDOPs were at that point no longer approved for use in election. And in Holland the system is such that any election result that is accepted by Parliament itself is a valid result, so there's no complaints later, and there's also no question about the validity of an election after that point. The state also had to pay the court costs, which was pretty much nothing. And another interesting thing that happened in that case is that the ESD1, which is the machine that Holland is using, but that's also approved in Germany, the D is actually for Deutschland. The ESD1, which is reapproved back into Holland because they had stock left over probably, had no prototype approval. And then they said, well, that's not necessary because it's really just another ES3B with a few minor changes. Which is interesting because they're saying something completely different here in Germany to sort of isolate the ESD1 from all the troubles that have been happening in Holland. NAIDOP has been reacting funnily, and on October 1st they were clearly not believing it yet. Well, the municipalities decide, and if you really wanted to get rid of the NAIDOPs, you'd have to change the law, which Parliament would have to agree on, never realizing that Parliament doesn't need to vote on regulations which the ministry can change by themselves. And voting on paper is bad anyway, it will never work. Then on October 12th, they were realizing that their computers were going to go away for a while. And they said, well, the market was saturated anyway. And now the market is all open again because, of course, we get to build this new system. We should be thanking the Secretary of State and the Court House Commission because the decision was based on that report. And then on November 28th, they did a press release which they said election systems will generate a lower turnover, especially in the Netherlands. Less machines were sold because the market is saturated. We made some extra profit because we had to put seals on them, because the Dutch machines were not sealed at all. Anybody could just open them and change the software. And so they had to seal all the machines in 2006, from which they made extra money, because they charged copiously for that. And as you can see, you are in Germany here is one of the countries which is increasingly positive towards voting machines. So things are looking better and better. The market is open again, and we're going to be doing great. They also sent an interesting letter to Parliament, basically saying everybody's dumb and we're smart, everybody gets it wrong, our voting machine computers aren't even computers. And of course, if you look at the type plate on the machine, you can see that they themselves call it a STEM computer. It's perfectly secure, and they also said it's very transparent. Now, well, how they define very transparent, we're still not sure. Also, there is a new solution, and this new solution is already done. There's no need to think about anything. We've already hooked up a printer to our machine, and then it can be that voting printer, and we can also do the counting machines. So there's no need to throw away your existing investment on NADAPS, and we can just keep selling these machines. NADAP has also brought a number of new cases. Of course, they've appealed the decision in the case that we brought. That is now at the highest instance. We don't think they stand much of a chance, but they're trying anyway. And it's very interesting in that highest instance because the state is now turning against them. We were basically appealing a state decision in which they were heard as a third party. So we were against them and the state. And now in the appeal, they've appealed, and both the state and us are asking the court to throw the case out. So that's a very interesting development. And they've also made a new case against the government. This new decision to basically retract the legislation, they're fighting that as well, which probably stands even less of a chance. And then there's Groenendaal, the company that makes the tabulation software. And they are threatening to sue the country because the cities were told, no, you can't use their software anymore. And there's nothing in the law about that software whatsoever. It can be closed source, it can be bought from anybody, you can use whatever you want, there's no regulations whatsoever. So they may actually have a point there, they may actually get some damages paid to them, we never know. Then on December 20th, we had a hearing, a public hearing, which wasn't so public because it was just NADAP and us and the ministry. But we had a public hearing about the case they brought against the government. And in that hearing, they all of a sudden said, well, the damages resulting from these retractions run in the millions of euros, which of course contradicts everything they've been saying so far. So we've asked them if that wasn't stock-sensitive information or whether we were allowed to publish that, which made them all upset. This is NADAP stock. As you can see, during this year, because what you're seeing here, the bigger picture is actually the whole previous year. As you can see, their stock went up tremendously. Now, before interpreting this, you have to understand NADAP is a 600-person company. They do much, much more than electronic voting. They build cattle recognition and feed systems, door access systems, parking gates, all sorts of low-volume electronics that they build themselves or have built. But the voting thing is the only thing they're known for. So it's a large part of their public image, even though it's not a big portion of their turnover. As you can see, the red arrow, by the way, is when their competition was finally scrapped. As I said, they tried to reapprove SDU, and then when that didn't work, that was the first spike. Then the yellow is when the first report came out, because that was generally thought to be positive for NADAP. Of course, there's lots of things here that we can't explain, but the green arrow is the day before the Secretary of State announced that they would be voting on paper. And as you can see, it's been fairly steeply downhill from there. Okay, current status. The appeal is pending. NADAP's case against the state is on hold because they're waiting for the decision of the state in this that follows out of that hearing that just happened, the 20th. But neither will influence the future. the worst thing that could happen, quote unquote, is for NAIDOP to get money from the state as sort of damages because the state hasn't